Welcome to this webinar today. I'm Francis Seeley from GlobalNet 21 and Info Voices, a local group. And we often do these webinars where we talk to people who are trying to make a difference and in fact who are making a difference in our society, nationally, locally, or even globally sometimes. And today we're going to interview Benita Matofska. Now, Benita has, for some time now, been passionate about a world of sharing, what she calls a sharing economy. And I've worked with Benita before, and I know how committed and how energetic she is in doing that. And she's been very successful, and her movement has grown quite rapidly. And every year they have a global sharing week, and we're in that week now. I'm going to ask her about that, amongst other things. So, Benita, thank you for joining us today, and it's great you've been able to come. So maybe I could start by asking you if, you've been a champion of the sharing economy for some time now, for several years. Maybe you could tell people who are not sure what that means, exactly what a sharing economy is.
Well, it's a really good question, Francis, so thanks for asking, and definitely one of my favourite ones. Well, the sharing economy is often misunderstood, but I suppose very simply put, it's a system to live by. It's where we care for people and planet, and we share available resources in any way that we can. Because what we know is that although our planetary resources, may be finite, our capacity to share is unlimited. And the research that we've been carrying out over the last 3 years, I've been working on a book project, which I know we're going to be talking about, called Generation Share. And most importantly, what we've evidenced, and the research and the book that we've published for Global Sharing Week this week, is evidencing for the first time how the sharing economy is saving millions of lives worldwide. And when we hear that term sharing economy, many of us might think about Airbnb, we might possibly think about Uber, we might think about wrangles between taxi drivers and Uber drivers and regulations and regulatory battles. But actually the reality is that the sharing economy is much broader than that. And what this report and what this book demonstrates is that the world over, there are change makers who are saving lives through the sharing economy. And I suppose one very vivid example that I'm going to give you is in the UK, in fact. And we have two incredibly inspiring change makers. One is Dr. Natalie Schenker, who has set up a human milk bank, and this is through the sharing of human milk is saving the lives of premature babies. And we know that globally, milk banks globally could prevent 2.1 million deaths per year. And that's without looking at some of the food sharing initiatives also that are saving lives through tackling world poverty and hunger.
Okay, well, let's look at some of those things in a minute. But what's interesting, in a way, I think people would like to know, I think once, like me, you were a BBC producer. So how did you move from the work you did then to the work you do now? I mean, what led you to that big jump?
It's a big question, Francis, isn't it? So I left the wonderful world of television. You're absolutely right. That was absolutely my stomping ground for about 20 years, actually, working first in radio and then in broadcasting. And really, I wanted to be much more on the front line, delivering social value and giving back to society. That was really, what was my driver to become a journalist in the first place. And so, I left the BBC and I went to work in the charity sector. I worked for a charity called Enterprise UK. I was their head of global entrepreneurship. And during that time, because of my very grand title, which my friends used to joke sounded like head of the world, I used to be invited to present all sorts of awards and get involved in lots of really interesting global initiatives. And one of the most humbling experiences of my entire life was I was invited to be what was called a counsellor for the One Young World Congress, which is kind of like a youth Davos. And the idea was to be a mentor, but also to host some of the sessions. And when I asked who else would be a counsellor, I was told Desmond Tutu and Bob Geldof, to which I kind of responded, and you want me? And sure enough, I arrived and I shared a platform with Desmond Tutu. It was a very, very humbling experience. And that experience really led me to say, okay, what is it that I can do? Where would I like to have some real impact? And the imperative for me was to build a campaign that would be in a very positive way tackling some of our challenging problems. And this whole campaign to build a more caring, sharing economy really came from that, because, you know, I believe that we need to have positive solutions. We need some hope and positivity right now. And I, for one, believe that, you know, politicians have failed us, and we need responsible leaders, and they need to be positive, solution-focused leaders who are bringing hope and positivity to the world, because this is how we're going to get ourselves out of the mess that we're in. Okay, so you're trying to develop something from the bottom up rather than the politicians' way of doing things. You had this big idea. All of us in some time in our lives have big ideas. How did you start it? It must have been quite frightening. I mean, how did you create the momentum you have now? Well, it started very small. It started locally, right here in Brighton on my doorstep. And the first event that the People Who Share, which is the charity that I set it up as a non-profit at the beginning of 2011, although it was it sort of existed from 2010. And we started off by putting on these events called Crowd Share. And they were free community events where we would gather any of the local sharing initiatives, from car clubs to clothes swaps to skills exchanges. Any of the local initiatives would come along and they would be showcased and represented, and people would join for an afternoon of sharing. And the whole idea was to give people this experience, because, you know, the research that I've done that looks at, you know, what tips behavior change, what motivates somebody to, you know, to shift their behavior patterns and to adopt some of these ideas about sharing. And actually that is about having an experience and having a positive experience. So the thinking was, if we invite people onto these great events, these crowd shares, and they come along and they positively, you know, enjoy what's on offer, and also they discover all of the sharing that can happen on their doorstep. They find resources that they can access for their daily lives, from, you know, food that can be accessed, to clothing, to, you know, jobs and skill shares and so on. Then actually that is going to be a motivation for people to get involved in this and actually share more. Okay. And that's really where it began.
Yeah, so that's where it began. But how did you move from Brighton to the UK to the world?
So we started out with, in 2011, in June that year, we ran something that I called National Sharing Day. And I did this with, you know, no funding, with a couple of volunteers. But what I did was I approached lots of what I saw as like-minded organisations, some social enterprises, other kind of sharing initiatives, platforms, charities, people that I believed, you know, held these values dear, and approached those charities. And we had in the end, there was about 40 organisations that we managed to, you know, to bring on board as partners. And National Sharing Day itself just went viral. And we used the hashtag National Sharing Day, so it wasn't some kind of weird Morse code that people had to feel like they had to be part of some sort of exclusive club to understand it. And actually, we just talked about, you know, the things that make us human. You know, what can you share? This is what we're sharing for National Sharing Day. So it was a very simple campaign in many ways, very human campaign. And, you know, people held some events. We didn't really have any way of capturing those events as such. You know, we didn't have any financing or you know, any sort of mechanisms in place really, but we were just sharing, we were out there doing, and that really worked, and it just went viral. People liked this idea. And following that, and we were kind of trending on all this globally on Twitter, and, you know, suddenly this thing just caught fire. And so we decided to run Global Sharing Day, and that happened that same year. And Global Sharing Day grew and grew and grew. And again, you know, just this grew around the world, and we started to bring on board partners from different countries, and also regional partners and global partners. And it really grew from there. And 5 years ago, we decided to run Global Sharing Week. And the reason for that decision was because when we ran the days, they generally were run on Sundays or at the weekend. And, you know, the original thinking was, you know, families come together, people come together at weekends, you know, downtime, sharing in their communities. But what was happening is more and more businesses got involved, and there was more and more engagement across different sectors. These events spilled out into the week. And so as we were starting to register these events, we realized actually it was becoming a week organically in and of itself. And so that's what we did 5 years ago.
Okay, I mean, you're in Global Sharing Week now, and I'll ask you about that in a minute. But as you've gone global, you have your vision, and reading from your site, you say that your vision is a thriving, sustainable, and fair sharing economy where our collective capability meets our collective needs, and we collaborate to enhance each other's lives, protect our planet, and create wealth from for everyone's benefit. Now, that's a huge vision. How do you break that down into manageable tasks?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And essentially what we've done at the People Who Share, so this has been a really interesting year for us. We've become a charity. We're awaiting our Charity Commission registration. That's obviously a process. So we've gone from being a non-profit and a social enterprise to becoming a charity, because what we recognised was that actually the most important thing for the People Who Share is to be delivering public benefit. And what we uniquely do is we uniquely help people to unleash their sharing potential. Because as I mentioned earlier, we know that our planetary resources are finite, but we also know that our capacity to share is unlimited. So the question that you're then asking is, okay, well, it's all a big vision, but how do we get there? So what we've done is we've kind of broken that down, I suppose, into kind of feasible bite-sized chunks of activities that we can do. So what do? We do 4 things. So we promote. So through Global Sharing Week, which is the largest annual celebration of sharing and the sharing economy, we promote these values. We promote and showcase all these different ways in which people can discover and access shared resources. And that's really important, because often Global Sharing Week is often the first touch point for people. So that promotion, the availability enables people to discover that they can access shared food in their communities, that they can find, for example, ways that they can access clothing. For low-income communities, there are also all kinds of opportunities in terms of employment and training opportunities as well. And so this is something that's really important, the promotion. Then, of course, we educate. So we publish reports. And I mentioned that this year, not only are we publishing reports, but we published Generation Share. So we've got this whole book that is showcasing how the sharing economy, in very vivid, beautiful photography. It's a coffee table book. I can actually show you right here. That's Generation Share, and it just sort of starts to give you an idea of some of the beautiful photography in the book. But essentially, what we want to do is bring this alive. So we publish, and we also publish reports, and our reports are all about evidencing the social impact of the sharing economy, and that's what we focus on. So we're promoting, we're educating, and of course we're organising. So we have networks, we have regular events and meetups. We have the Global Sharing Economy Network that we meet up every quarter, and we discuss different events, and we always have a share table where we will collect items for public benefit for those in need of those resources. And we have workshops and all kinds of events. And that's what we do by way of organising. And then finally, of course, we share. So we have the largest collection. We have a share guide where people can access and find all these different organisations and projects and ways in which they can share in their communities. And we share through our share tables at our events. So those are really the 4 things that we tangibly do. And for us as People Who Share, it's really important as a charity that every step of the way we're delivering that public benefit.
Okay, so I can see how you develop personal sharing in that way. But do you ever sort of work with government to say that you've got to be a more sharing government, a collaborative government, and it's not just bottom up, there has to be some top down involvement as well?
Well, in the early days of the People Who Share, we did a lot of work in the policy realm. We were the first, I was the first person to bring the sharing economy to government attention back in 2013. And following that, helped to organise the first event at number 10 Downing Street on the 17th of January 2014, bringing together about 80 different organisations across the sharing economy, and I spoke at that event. And that led to the first report on the sharing economy. And so, I was really instrumental in kickstarting this. That said, and so we've done lots of work. I've spoken in the European Parliament. We've done lots of work with the European Commission as well. Also, done some work on an international level with some of the agencies like World Economic Forum and so on. But more recently, we have been less involved in the political realm, frankly, with good reason. We know there's a lot of chaos in politics at the moment. And for us, we are about creating public benefit, and that has to be the driver. And for us, it's about getting those, bringing immediate benefit to people's lives. That's what we want to do. And so our focus really has been on the kind of bottom up and the grassroots work, in the last year or two, I would say. That doesn't mean to say that we'll never work in that political realm again. And certainly, our influence is important. And, people do come to us and they, I take part in all kinds of, think tanks and surveys and policy research, policy pieces and so on. And we'll continue to do that. But in terms of kind of, direct work on a policy level, we have chosen deliberately to focus our efforts where we believe there's going to be the greatest public benefit.
Okay, I mean, I know you did some early work. In fact, you did a House of Commons meeting with us with Caroline Lucas.
Indeed, we did. We still work with Caroline. I have to say, Caroline has continued to be, she's one of the people that's endorsed the Generation Share book, and she's somebody that continues to endorse our work. In fact, every year when we launch Global Sharing Week, Caroline Lucas is usually our host. Again, we deliberately chose not to launch it from the House of Commons this year, and we held it in a community space, actually a part homeless hostel and social economy space in Camden on Monday evening this week. So again, it's been very deliberate, but it's not something that we shy away from at all, and we know that it's important. But again, our absolute imperative is creating that public benefit.
But in creating that public benefit, you may shy away from national government at the moment for obvious reasons, but local government has a role to play because they can enable in a local area a bottom-up approach, couldn't they?
Absolutely, and we are working with Brighton and Hove City Council. We've got and also Norwich City Council. Norwich is the UK's first sharing city. So we're very active in terms of working with local government, and I agree that that's, again, we see that as a very good route to bringing about that public benefit that we hold so dear. In terms of Brighton and Hove City Council, we are developing the whole concept of Brighton as a sharing city. We held an event last November. We had about 130 people and organisations that attended that event. And again, that was to give people this experience of the sharing city and to introduce them. What we're doing this weekend as part of it's our grand finale for Global Sharing Week is we have an event that's taking place on the seafront on Hove Lawns. There'll be hundreds of people in attendance. It's called The Big Share. We've got everything from a clothes swap to a kindness mob, people going around doing random acts of kindness. We've got skills exchanges, we've got a music share, there's a pop-up picnic, we've even got beer for hugs. We've got a mobile upcycled DJ booth with, playing, music for everyone to enjoy and share. It's a very festive environment. We've also got a sharing hub run by the Human Hive. And again, that is very much about bringing people together across the city to discover all of the sharing that happens on their doorstep, working with trusted house sitters who are really wonderful, pet sharing community. So, we really are very much looking at all of these different things, including like animal welfare and those kind of issues. It's about caring for people and planet and putting sharing at the heart of everything that we do.
Well, that's a lot of things you're doing in Brighton, but if a local authority somewhere else wanted to sort of enhance and help develop a sharing economy, what advice would you give them?
Well, we have a whole mechanism for creating and building a sharing city, and we work with local governments in order to do that. There are kind of series of steps that local government can put in place. And, the first one is very much about bringing together across sectors a coalition of organisations and people who believe in the principles of a sharing city. And that's really where the People Who Share comes in, because what we do is we work with those local governments to bring that group together and help to facilitate that. Because in the first instance, you need that positive leadership, you need that demonstrator. And it really is, when you look at the sharing cities that are happening around the world, and we also partner with the Sharing Cities Alliance, who also help to build these structures and put these mechanisms in place to enable cities. But the most important factor and the first step is always about bringing together lots of different stakeholders across the city and figuring out for that particular city what works for them. Because what works for Brighton won't necessarily work for Leeds or Manchester or Liverpool or Glasgow or Cardiff. So, you know, it's all absolutely relevant to what is important for that city. You know, what are the resources that that city has access to? What is it that people living in the city, what do they need? What do they need access to? And also, what does the city really have to showcase? What is that hidden potential? What is that? What are those resources that people can access? You know, it's all about unleashing that city's potential to share and collaborate, but it has to come from the people who live in this and work in the city itself.
Okay, so those are the recommendations and the advice you would give. But let's talk about now. You are in Global Sharing Week. So what are you doing this year? I mean, what is Global Sharing Week this year, and what activities and what involvement would you want people to you know, join you with?
So, well, this year it's the largest ever Global Sharing Week. I can tell you that this event right now, we're on a webinar, is one of 530 events that have been registered on globalsharingweek.org in 211 cities and 49 countries. And through our partner network of about 300 organizations, we reach over 100 million people around the world. The events that take place range from, you know, a silent disco beach clean to you know, a giant clothes swap, where also we have like car-free streets, where people have streets closed to traffic for you know, for a certain day during the week, or indeed for the whole week in some cases. There are, you know, giant pop-up picnics, something called rubbish runs. One of my personal favorites is something called a disco soup, where people bring food that would otherwise go to landfill to a central place, and that food is cooked and local musicians come and play, and essentially it's a party made from shared resources. So there are all kinds of you know, sharing activities that happen. We have businesses who do skills exchanges. So there are lots of different activities across different sectors really, and they're incredibly varied. And the only thing that we say in terms of a criteria for qualification to be a Global Sharing Week event, there needs to be some sharing that's happening, which sounds like an obvious statement, but that's obviously important to us. And those are the kinds of things, but they're incredibly varied across the world. The big project for us this year for Global Sharing Week, though, has been the publication of Generation Share. And I think it goes back to this earlier point of it's important that we showcase and demonstrate and evidence these positive stories of social impact and show for people in very real terms. And we've brought this together through beautiful photography to bring this to life. It's published by Policy Press, who publish books of social change, and it's available on Amazon and from all good bookstores. But most importantly, the book itself, it's a non-profit publisher, it's produced from waste materials, and proceeds from every single book go to fund and educate a slum-based girl in Mumbai, one of our Changemaker projects, who's built a school in the slum for girls based on sharing principles, and also plants trees through the Eden Reforestation Project. So it's good through and through. And this is the important thing for us this year, is promoting and people understanding and learning for the first time that the sharing economy is saving lives, millions of lives around the world. We have enough food to end world hunger. Just in the UK, for example, 650 million meals worth of food is thrown away each year. And if that food was diverted to the 8.2 million people that were living in food poverty, there is no reason in the UK or in the world, indeed, that anybody goes hungry. What we need to be doing is sharing those resources. We have the surplus resources. Instead of wasting them, we need to get that resource to the people in the right place.
Okay, so you're doing a great deal. And in a way, you know, the sharing economy as time has come, hasn't it? I mean, for example, climate change, which we now know is facing an emergency situation, sharing is becoming increasingly important. And if we're going to save our planet, we're going to have to share more.
Absolutely. And, you know, one of the factors that we've been looking at through the research for Generation Share is this whole idea of, you know, what I call the kind of everyday activism. You know, we've seen Greta Thunberg, a 16-year-old schoolgirl who has brought climate change to the attention of world leaders. In some cases, for the first time, she has helped to put that at the top of the agenda. I'm not saying single-handedly, but she's clearly been instrumental. And I think she really epitomizes this Generation Z, this generation of young people who are saying, we want a future, we're going to claim that for ourselves. And, you know, in the book, we have some stories of Generation Z and those young people who, through sharing resources, are ensuring that they are able to have the future that they deserve and need. And, as you say, climate change is absolutely urgent and pressing. And so the need to share resources is an imperative. In the future, we're going to have to share resources. And I suppose what all this work is about is we have to take these urgent steps towards building a sharing economy. People need to understand that, consumerism has destroyed the planet. Actually, we don't need to be purchasing new goods. What we do need to be doing is accessing, shared resources. Everything that I'm wearing, this is from a clothes swap. Everything that I'm wearing, everything that I wear every day, the things that I buy are all pre-loved. They're loved and they're new to me when they come to me, but they've had another life elsewhere. And I think that's what's important, is that we start to think about, when we get up every morning, I always say to myself, and I say to people, ask yourself, what can I share today? That could be as simple as a smile with a neighbor. It could be something related to your work. But the point is that we need to be building this more sharing, caring economy. And by doing so, we're going to be able to sustain the planet. But unless we do that, we're simply not going to survive.
Sustaining the planet is obviously a major priority. The other priority is that we have huge amounts of poverty in our country, and the Joseph Rowntree Foundation has really looked at the depth of that poverty and the scale of that poverty. Now, is sharing a way of tackling poverty? I mean, you've mentioned how it saved lives, but is sharing a way of encouraging social inclusion?
Absolutely. So, for example, we know from our own research that there are 10 times the number of homes worldwide than there are people without homes. And again, this point about the sharing of those resources can bring an end to these very pressing problems. We also know, for example, that, we heard some wonderful stories at our launch event for Global Sharing Week on Monday evening from food sharing app Olio, about how, people were able to access food from that app. People who could not, this is in the UK, who could not give their children breakfast. And actually what they were able to do through the app was to feed their children and send them to school, not on an empty stomach. And my point is that, sharing is absolutely the way that will solve poverty. We also know from other research that people from low-income communities are benefiting threefold from the sharing economy. So it's incredibly important for us to understand that. We know that car sharing addresses transport poverty, for example. I've talked about, the number of apps and platforms. We have a fantastic example in the UK of Beam, which stands for Be Amazing. And what they are is a crowdfunding platform for homeless people, for training and employment for homeless people. So what they're doing is they're literally saving lives. They're able to get people off the streets and into employment through training, giving them, thinking about a career path for people who, for whom the whole idea of any kind of qualification just hasn't existed in their lives. So, sharing is absolutely the way that we will solve these pressing problems of global poverty. It is through the sharing of resources, and it is absolutely by diverting, the resources that are being wasted with no good reason to those who need them the very most.
Okay, so how do you see the sharing economy developing in the next few years? And do you think your passion will still be there? Will you face burnout because you have been so energetic on this? Will the sharing economy happen in a big way? Will you still be there?
Well, in terms of my personal story, absolutely, Francis. This is my life's mission, and that was the realization for me back in in 2010, that this is really for me, this is what I was born to do. This is why I'm here. So my passion will be never ending. Absolutely. In terms of the the evolution of the sharing economy itself, it's been through quite an evolution. This year marks the 10th birthday of the sharing economy. It was technically it was born out of the recession of 2008, and certainly 2009 was where we really started to see the kind of very early signs of the sharing economy. So it's a decade old, and it has been through an evolution. And what we're seeing now, and this kind of next phase of the sharing economy, is all about how all this innovation and technology can be applied for social and environmental benefit. And that's the difference. So in the early phase, we're hearing a lot more about Silicon Valley backed ventures, and we were hearing a lot more about the economics of the sharing economy. We were hearing a lot about the commercial value. organisations like PwC who have issued various reports looking at the contribution to GDP and the economic viability of the sharing economy. What we're seeing now in this next phase in terms of what's up ahead is very much the application of this for social good. And I think that's really, for me, the most important aspect of all this. And also for people to understand that, there are so many positive initiatives out there. We need more positive news. I think it's shameful, and I'm saying this as a former journalist, that the media focus is entirely on the negative. And actually there are, huge numbers of positive initiatives that are happening out there. And we know that they are contagious. So the more that people hear about this positive news and showcase these incredible initiatives that are happening, the more people are able to get involved, discover them, support them, use them for their everyday lives, and help to make that change that the planet needs. So I think that's what's really important.
Okay, so if people wanted to get involved, how would they do it? How would they get in touch with you?
People get in touch with me. I mean, you can get in touch with me via the People Who Share. You can get in touch with me, Benita, at benitamatofska.com, through my own website, or at the People Who Share. I'm very active on Twitter, at Benita Matofska. You can also reach me I say via email. So it's very easy to tap into. The People Who Share hold lots of events. We're very open door. Also, we're a volunteer-run organisation. We love people to come and get involved if people want to share their time. We're currently looking for a whole slew of volunteers to come and support the team, in lots of different ways. So it's very much an open-door organisation. That's how we work. That's how we operate, in a very collaborative way. And we do hope that people will come and get involved. And on a simple level, people don't even need to sign up to any platforms. When you get up on a morning, say, what can I share today, and go and share it. That's my biggest piece of advice. To share is to be human, and this is completely accessible for anyone that wants to be part of it.
Okay, well, thank you for doing this, because you've done a tremendous amount in 10 years and grown quite extensively, and people know about you and they know the work you're doing. And you also show, like Greta Thunberg, that one person can achieve a lot with a lot of passion and a lot of help and a lot of sharing and collaborative work. So I hope people will contact you, and I hope they will.
Thank you. And Francis, I do just finally want to mention this book again, because every book sold is going to educate a girl in the slums in Mumbai. So Generation Share, and it's made from waste, and it's also planting trees and tackling poverty. So I really urge people to buy it, because this is one way that you can share. Generation Share.
Okay, we'll put that up on our site and the mail that goes out with this webinar. So thank you for doing this, Benita. That was great. And, good luck this week. You're going to be very busy indeed. So
thank you.
Thank you for doing it. And we'll end this webinar now.
Thanks so much.